So this is the lesson for 8-2, which is volume of cones. All right, the formula for volume of a cone is 1/3 times pi times r squared times h. Just like yesterday, your r squared, the r stands for radius, and the h stands for the height. For 1/3 in your formula, you can either use 1 divided by 3, and you could just type that right into the calculator, 1 divided by 3, and then times pi times r squared times h. Or if you want to use a decimal version of 1/3, you can use 0.3333333, fill up that whole calculator with threes. If you want a number of threes to use, just use 10 of them. All right, that's a good safe number, easy to remember. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the threes, and you're good. Don't use 0.3. You will get the wrong answers. Don't use 0.33. You will get the wrong answers. Don't use 0.333. You will get the wrong answers. All right, you have to fill up the whole calculator screen with threes for 1/3. You'll get the wrong answers because half the questions, just like yesterday, you have to round to the nearest tenth, and half the questions you have to leave in terms of pi. And those ones that you have to round to the nearest tenth, if you just use 0.3, you'll get the wrong answers. If you use 0.33, you'll get the wrong answers. So, moral of the story, fill up that whole screen with threes. You can't type too many of them. So if you accidentally type in 11 or 12 or 13 threes, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. If you only type in 8 or 9 of them, that's fine too. But just don't type in 1, 2, or 3 threes because you'll definitely get the wrong answer every time. Probably the safest way is to just do 1 divided by 3. All right. So anyway, that is the formula that you have to use for every problem today. So just like yesterday, we have to leave answers in terms of pi and rounded to the nearest tenth. So we need to find our radius and we need to find our height. The bottom of the cone is a circle. So you see this circle right here, that is the bottom of the cone. And the radius is halfway across the circle, just like yesterday. It goes from the center of the circle out towards the edge. So that is your radius. Your height of the cone goes from the tip of the cone down through the center of the cone right to that center part where the radius starts, the center of the circle. So this 5.2 is your height. So when we go to sub it into the formula, we have 1/3. No matter which way you use it, either 1 divided by 3 or 0.33333 times pi. Now remember, if you don't have a pi button on your calculator, you can use 3.1416 times the radius squared, the radius being 3.6, so times 3.6 squared, times your height, which is 5.2. Also remember, when you do this 3.6 squared, you want to do 3.6 caret button 2. So you're going to type that right into the calculator exactly how it says. 0.33333 or 1 divided by 3 times pi or times 3.1416 times 3.6 squared or 3.6 caret button 2 times 5.2. When you type that into the calculator, you get 70.5727373 blah blah blah. Again, all of these decimals that you get today keep on going on and on and on forever because pi keeps on going on and on and on forever. So just like yesterday, you're going to round your answer to the nearest tenth. The 5 is in the tenths place, so you need to look at the number that's after it. That number after it is 5 or higher, so this is going to round up to be 70.6. So that's rounding our answer to the nearest tenth. You're also going to have questions that you need to leave in terms of pi. So when we leave it in terms of pi, you have to type in everything except for the pi button, right? So you're typing in 1/3 times 3.6 squared times 5.2. You're not going to type in that pi symbol. We're just going to take that pi symbol and put it at the end of our answer. So what you're going to type into the calculator is 1/3 times 3.6 squared times 5.2. When you do that, you get 22.464. Again, you don't round these ones, all right? We're just going to leave it however it is. You only round the ones that we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So you get 22.464 and just stick that pi symbol at the end. Remember that in class kick, you're going to type in 22.464 and just write the word pi after it. No spaces in between the 4 and the p. So that was when you're given the radius. Let's see what happens when you're given the diameter. They are going to try and trick you by giving you the diameter sometimes. Here's your circle at the bottom of the cone. And notice that this 18.7 goes all the way across that circle. So this 18.7 is really your diameter. We don't want the diameter because we have radius in our formula. So remember, to find the radius, you have to take the diameter and divide it by 2. 18.7 divided by 2 is 9.35. That is your radius. So that's what we're going to sub into the formula. Your height of the cone goes from the tip of the cone down to the center point of that circle. So this is your height. Your height is 6.8. So in our formula, you're going to do 1/3 times pi, again, or 3.1416, times your radius squared, so times 9.35 squared. Remember, that would be 9.35 caret button 2 when you're typing it into the calculator. Or if you don't have a caret button, it's just 9.35 times 9.35. And then times the height, which is 6.8. So you're going to type this directly into the calculator, all 4 things right into the calculator. So 1 divided by 3, or 0.33333 times pi, or times 3.1416, times 9.35 squared, times 6.8. When you do that, you get a big long decimal answer. Again, all of these are going to be big long decimal answers. Blah, blah, blah at the end because it keeps on going on forever. We're going to round it to the nearest tenth. The 5 is in the tenths place, so we need to look at the number after it. That number after it this time is 4 or lower, so this 5 stays the same. So we have 622.5. For a question that we're going to leave in terms of pi, you're still going to have your 1/3. You're still going to multiply by your 9.35 squared, which is your radius squared. You're still going to multiply by your height, which is 6.8. And remember, that pi symbol, we're just going to stick at the end. We're still multiplying the whole thing by pi in our formula, but we're just going to stick that symbol at the end. So what you're going to type into your calculator is this: 1/3 times 9.35 squared times 6.8. When you do that, you get an ugly decimal, because sometimes that will happen, especially with the 1/3. You get 198.157666666, or 6 repeating. And then all that we're going to do with this pi symbol is stick it at the end. So it's that number, 198.157666666 pi. And that would be our answer in terms of pi. So remember, when we're looking for our answer in terms of pi, we don't type the pi symbol into the calculator. When we're trying to find our answer to the nearest tenth, we do type in the pi symbol. All right, if If you could try this one on your own, please. All right, find it both rounding to the nearest tenth and leaving your answer in terms of pi. Go ahead and try this one, please. So in this one, the circle of the cone is right here. This 9.4 is pointing at the radius of the cone. So this 9.4 is the radius. The 6 is the height of the cone because it goes from the tip of the cone to the center of the cone. So when we go to type it into the calculator, we have 1/3 times pi, or times 3.1416, times your radius squared, which is 9.4 squared, times your height, which is 6. You're going to type this whole thing right into the calculator. When you go and type it into the calculator, you get an answer of 555.1822537, blah, blah, blah at the end. We're going to round it to the nearest tenth. The 1 is in the tenths place. We need to look at the number after it. That is 5 or higher. So we're going to round up to be 555.2. If we were leaving it in terms of pi, we're still going to have our 1/3. We're still going to have our 9.4 squared. We're still going to have our 6. But then we're just going to stick that pi in at the end. So what you're going to type into the calculator is you are going to type in 1/3 times 9.4 squared times 6, and you get 176.72, and then just take that pi symbol and stick it in at the end. So we have 176.72 pi. Go ahead and try another one on your own. Now be very careful. Again, notice that we have our circle at the bottom, but this 300 represents the diameter. All right, the diameter is 300 because it goes all the way across the circle. We don't want the diameter, we want to use the radius, so make sure that you use the radius instead of the diameter. Go ahead and do this one, please. Find it both ways, rounding to the nearest tenth and leaving it in terms of pi. You are going to get very big numbers because our radius and our height are big numbers. So this is our diameter. We want to divide that 300 by 2 to find the radius. 300 divided by 2 is 150 for our radius. This 300 is our height. It goes from the tip of the cone to the center of the circle, and that is our height. So we have 1/3 times pi. Pi is 3.1416 times your radius squared. So times 150 squared times your height, which is 300. You're going to type that whole thing right into the calculator, exactly how it says. And you're going to get a big number. You're going to get 7,068,583.471, blah, blah, blah at the end. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. The 4 is in the tenths place. We have to look at the number after it. That is 5 or higher. So we really have 7,068,583.5. Leaving our answer in terms of pi, we would still have 1/3. We would still have the 150 squared. We still have the 300. We're just going to stick that pi in at the end. So we're multiplying by everything except for pi. So we're multiplying by 1/3 times 150 squared times 300. When you do that, you get 2,250,000. And then just take that pi symbol and stick it in at the end. Now, just like yesterday, you're not going to have the picture problems, but you'll also have questions that look like this, where you're specifically given the radius and given the height. So all you're going to do is sub them in where they belong. So 1/3 times pi times your radius squared, which is 5, times your height. So if we were rounding this one to the nearest tenth, we're going to get 314.1592654, blah, blah, blah at the end. We're going to round our answer to the nearest tenth. So 1 is in the tenths place. We have to look at the one after it. That is 5 or higher. So that's going to round up to be 314.2. When we go to do it in terms of pi, we're still going to have our same exact thing as we did up here, but we're not going to type in the pi symbol. So we have 1/3 times 5 squared times 12. We're just going to take that pi symbol and stick it at the end. So we're just going to type in 1/3 times 5 squared times 12, which is 100, and then just take that pi symbol and stick it at the end. So we have an answer of 100 pi. We're also going to be tricked, just like yesterday. Notice in this one, we're being given the diameter. Remember, we don't want the diameter, we want the radius. So the first thing that you need to do is find the radius. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. This is the last one. Try this one on your own, please. If the diameter is 14, we want to take half of that. So we want to do 14 divided by 2, which is 7 for your radius. All right, so we're going to use radius as 7 and our height is 5. So we have 1/3 times pi times your radius squared. Make sure you use the radius, not the diameter. So 7 squared times your height of 5. Take all 4 of those terms and multiply them together. When you do that, you get 256.5634. We are going to take and round it to the nearest tenth. So the 5 is in the tenths place. We need to look at the number after it. That's 5 or higher as well. So we're going to round up to be 256.6. Leaving it in terms of pi, you're going to multiply everything together except for the pi symbol. We're just going to stick that pi symbol at the end. So we're going to take and we're going to multiply together 1/3 times 7 squared times 5. You get 81.666666 or 81.6 repeating. Take that pi symbol and stick it in at the end. So we have 81.6 repeating pi. Again, be very, very careful on today's questions. Make sure you realize if you have the radius or if you have the diameter.